Hi, my name's Paul Grogan and welcome to another gaming rules review video. This time I'm going to be telling you what I think about Ragusa, designed by Fabio Lopiano and published by Braincrack Games and Capstone Games. A huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters who helped make these videos possible, and this is one of the games that I was voted on by my Patreon supporters as a game that I would review. If you like the content that I make, then please consider supporting me over at patreon.com, and you can also get to vote on what games I review. A special thank you to Roger Dial this time. Thank you, Roger, for all of your support, both financially and otherwise. Anyway, on with the game. So what is Ragusa? Well, Ragusa was the sole rival to Venice. 15th century trading and Mediterranean port, and what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building, basically placing houses onto the board, which do a variety of different things. You're trying to get victory points, probably represents prestige or something like that. Now, my initial thoughts on this game are sort of one sentence review. I like the game, but I need to play it some more. There are bits about that game that I like, and I'm going to cover those in this video, but I'm also going to cover the things that I'm not too sure about. So to give you a very rough overview of the game, it actually plays really quickly. What does it say on the box is actually the playtime. Does it say on the box what the playtime is? So it says on the back, 60 minutes. It also says 1 to 5 players, and it does actually play 1 to 5 players. I have played this game solo. I've also played it at 5 players, and I have played it at 4 players. It is a game I would have loved to have played more of before doing this review, but you know, time and everything else. So yeah, I've not played it at 2 player, I've not played it at 3 player, but I have played it at 1, 4 and 5. So my thoughts on the game are based on that. Anyway, it says 60 minutes and that's about right. In fact, once you know what you're doing, you could probably even play it less than that. And one of the things that I like about this game is the amount that I get back from the game for that playtime. You know, 5 or 10 years ago, this experience probably would have been a 2 hour, 2.5 hour game. And although it does play quite quickly and it does play quite smoothly, there's quite a lot of, well, there are very important decisions that you can make in the game. This is a Euro style game. There is a very low random element. I mean, there's no dice in it or anything like that. There is a slight random element, which I'll come on to in a minute. But other than that, it's more about the decisions that you take and where you place your buildings. Roughly speaking, without going into much detail, on your turn, you place one of your houses. Okay? And that's it. And when everybody's placed all of their houses, you go around the table, placing one at a time. That's it, the end of the game. And with some player counts, you'll only get 9 houses. So that's basically 9 turns to put something on the board. Sounds simple. There are 2 main areas of the map. There is the outside of the city and there's the inside of the city. And let's touch on one of the mechanisms within the game because it is quite different and it is quite cool. But in order to build outside the city, you need to have a source of wood. And to build inside the city, you need a source of stone. And when you place a house on the board, let's say I decide to place this one here, you actually look at each of the hexes which is bordering the point where you want to place it. And you need to work out what the cost to build in each of those hexes is, and then you take the highest one. And the cost is based on how many houses you already have in that hex. So placing your first piece on the board will cost you 1 wood, because it's outside the city, so it costs a wood. And that piece actually generates 1 wood, so you're okay. But if I was to place this one here, that is my first piece on this particular hex. Actually, it's not because I've got that one there. So it's actually my second piece here, my second piece here, and my second piece here. So the cost is 2 wood. It's not cumulative. It's not 2 plus 2 plus 2. It's just the highest of them. So the more houses you place on the same hex, the more wood you'll need. And to build inside the city uses stone, and that uses a very similar mechanism. So if I was to place a house down here, for example, that would cost me 1 stone because I currently don't have anything here or here. But if I was to now put another one here, actually that would cost me 2 stone because I've now got 2 here. I've also got 2 here. The cost for here would have been 1 stone, but the cost here and here is 2, so the cost is 2 stone. I don't normally go into mechanisms in this much detail in my review, but I kind of wanted to in this, because it's quite important and it's one of the fundamental mechanisms in the game and I quite like it. What it means is you're going to have to build outside the city first because your first house is going to require either a wood or a stone. The only way to get stone is all the resources are outside the city. Therefore, your first one is going to have to be outside the city and go on one of the spaces that generates at least 1 wood to pay for itself. And yeah, and as the game goes on, basically you'll put more and more houses on the board. So outside the city, all of your houses just generate resources. Very simple. You track the resources by using cards on your player board. So you rotate these to a different number. The ones inside the city are where it all matters, because each of these particular areas will give you a particular bonus and allow you to do a certain action. Now, here's the other fundamental mechanism within the game. And I'm talking about this because it is important for a point that I'm going to make later on. Whenever you place, so say I place this house here, what happens is that's going to activate all of these 3 hexes here. So it's going to activate the ability of this, the ability of this, and the ability of this. I can choose the order in which they are done, but then what happens is I activate my house, and then everybody else who has a house in that hex will also get to activate that ability again. Now that applies to pretty much everywhere except for this one and this one. This one, that doesn't happen. But if I was to place this one here, I would get to activate this hex, which is just me, this hex, which is just me, then I can activate this one, which is me, and then I rotate round and it's me again. So I get to do it a second time, and then green gets to do it if green was here. So that is a fundamental mechanism in the game, and actually I've taught you half the game already. The placement rules with the resources is a little bit different from what we normally see, and the placing one and then activating everything else that's there is also one of the core mechanisms in the game. So I'm going to touch on some of the downsides of the game now, and what I've done, because I've only played this game 3 times, I've actually read quite a lot of other reviewers' comments to get a little bit more of a rounded approach. Now I know that means that some of the stuff that I'm going to tell you now is based on things that I've read from what other people are saying. I'm not completely plagiarizing it, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to actually give you not just my opinion after 3 games, but also what quite a few other people have said about it. So one of the criticisms is that your first few turns are scripted because you have no stone, you have no wood, therefore your first piece has to be around the outside and it has to go on a wood generating space. Okay. And then if you don't go on a stone generating space, you still can't build in the city, so you're then going to have to go on a stone generating space on your second placement. And then you're probably going to want to be generating grapes and olives in order to generate oil and wine and things like that. So some people have commented that the first few moves appear to be a bit scripted. I took that into account, and then I've played it twice since reading that, and I'm not sure I completely agree. Now, as I say, you've got to build outside first. But as I say, after I'd read that some people felt it was a bit too scripted, I then played the next game going, right, do I really have a choice here? Am I actually making a decision of where I'm putting my house? And actually, I felt that I did. So I can see what they're saying, but I'm not on board with that criticism. I think your opening moves are absolutely vital, and they will determine what path you're going to take for the rest of the game. Because do you go with lots of grapes? Do you go with a bit of each? Do you go with the stone at the start, or do you go with multiple wood? You know, your houses are limited, so you've got to make every single one count. Right. The other big criticism of the game that a lot of people have, and I'm still on the fence about this one, and I'm going to tell you a bit about it, is I've mentioned that once you put a house on the board, everything else around that hex activates. Now this game takes up to 5 players. So if you are the first player, and the play just goes round and round the table until everybody's run out of houses. There isn't any rounds, the start player doesn't change or anything like that. But if you are the start player, you will be putting the first house on the board. Then all of the other players will place. Then you'll be putting the next house on the board, and everybody else will place. So it doesn't take a genius to work out that if you're the first player, you're probably going to get more secondary activations than the other players. That's just the maths. That's how it's going to work. And there are some people who said, that's a massive problem, and they've played it a whole bunch of times, and the first and second players always win. I haven't seen that happen in my game, and I've spoken to some other people that have said they haven't seen it happen as well. So I was really uncertain about this, and I wanted to give you as much information as I could about this potential problem with the game. So I actually went and spoke to the designer and the publisher, and I said, look, you know a lot of people are saying this. What's your opinion on it? He actually said, we've been through all of this. This came up in the development process, because it has to. It's so blatantly obvious. And what they did is they analysed loads of games, and they played it lots, and they looked at the stats, and they found out that the perception that everybody seems to have, and they had when they first started testing the game, doesn't actually bear through in the actual stats. The last players have different kind of advantages than the first players. Although, yeah, they will get less secondary activations, but they have the advantage of being able to place after everybody else. And there was a couple of other things as well. He told me, I can't quite remember, sorry about that. But yeah, he said basically him and the designer have done the stats, they've played loads of games, they've analysed the data, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. So there you go. That's what I'm saying, what the publisher has said. If you think it's a problem in your games and the first player is always winning, then you might want to introduce some kind of house rule. One of the ones that I've seen online is that you do actually play the game in rounds, and after round one, whoever was the start player passes their piece, that passes the start player marker to the left, and then play will continue from there. So it means if you're going first in one round, you're going to be going last in the next round. And I'm keen to try that because it's a very simple house rule and it will certainly fix that potential problem. But again, we'll see. So anyway, I've talked quite a lot about those core mechanisms, and as I say, I don't normally go into this much detail about the review. Do I like the game? Yes, I like the game, and right now I would never say no to a game of this. One of the reasons why I like the game is those decisions are really important. And your first 3 rounds are really simple. You put a piece on there, you get some resources and you're done. And they're over in like 5-10 minutes. But then later on you're like, oh wow, where do I want to go? And you've got to make this really important decision. A lot of the spaces that you will go on will get you points immediately, but there's end game scoring as well. One of the things that the players are doing with this particular space, the Mason, is constructing these wall pieces, and these wall pieces will get to be placed gradually on the board as the game goes on, and then that will score you points immediately, but there is a your longest section of wall where you have pieces along it. So there's end game scoring as well. The cathedral is lots of end game points. There's lots of extra points that you can get from the ships as well. So the other reason I like it is there appear to be very different strategies. You can go really heavy onto fish, you can go heavy on the trading at the wharf, you can be collecting a lot of these ship cards, you can be building sections of the wall with the tower, the architect and the mason to get loads of points there. And in the games I've played, certainly the 4 and the 5 player game, people were taking a wide variety of different strategies, and the points ended up relatively close in the end. So it did seem that it was quite balanced. So I like that. Crunchy decisions, plays in an hour, which is a realistic time, I believe. Yeah, right, let's talk about the components. Overall, the components are really good. These towers, really nicely done, little wooden pieces. Components-wise, there's only one real problem that I had with it, and that's these cards that represent your resources. First of all, the amount of vertical space that each player's board takes up is quite a bit, and table space is a limiting factor. So it's a little fiddly. I don't know if there's some other way they could have done it. They probably experimented with different ways. But yeah, maybe a D8 or something, but then again, dice are expensive. But the bit about these I don't like, and I'm assuming that this was a production issue. I am assuming that this wasn't deliberate, but these don't fit in the actual holes. Basically, these needed to be a bit more rounded. And one thing I am going to do is I'm going to get a pair of scissors to these and cut them out and make them more rounded. I didn't want to do it before this video, because otherwise you would be seeing something that I've modified myself. But yeah, I think it was a production issue. These needed really to actually properly slot in there so that you could turn them around a bit easier. They're just a bit fiddly and they don't fit in. Other than that, components-wise, I didn't have a problem with it. As I say, the wooden pieces are really nice and really nicely cut, and you get quite a lot of them because there's like 5 player colours. Rulebook-wise, yeah, you know I can be quite critical on rulebooks. The rulebook was generally okay. There was no big problems that I had with the rulebook, apart from one bit where there is a typo. So if you do get the game, make sure you know this. On the section about the architect, can you see that on the camera there? There's a typo, and it's not just a spelling mistake, but basically it says, regardless of whether or not there is a tower there, that should say a house. Okay, it's a very, very important rule. And yeah, it was just a slight error in the rule book. But other than that, yeah, I thought the rule book was pretty good, and I was able to learn how to play from the rule book. In fact, I've actually done another video on my channel. If you want to see me sit down and learn this game from the rule book, having known nothing about it beforehand, I actually did that. I did it live as a video. I played the solo game live, learning from the rule book. So if you're interested in that, go and check that out. It kind of acts as a little bit of a tutorial as well. So let's talk about the solo game. The solo game was the first experience I had of this game, and I'm probably not going to suggest that you start with the solo game, even though I did, because nobody else was here when I wanted to do it. But The solo game is a very different experience. I actually really liked the solo game. I prefer the multiplayer experience because I generally enjoy multiplayer games more, but the way the solo game works is really clever. It uses a set of cards, and at the start of the game, what you actually do is you actually populate the board with a whole bunch of these black houses. And this tells you exactly where the AI player is going to build. You don't know exactly when, but you know where they are going to build during the whole game. And you can plan for that. So if you know they're going to build 2 houses in a particular location, you're like, right, well, if I build there first, I'm going to get to reactivate my house a whole bunch more times because I know where they're going to build. So it is quite clever in that way. I like the way that the solo game is done. The other thing in the solo game, and the reason why I'm suggesting maybe it isn't good for your first game, is you actually start with a fixed setup of 3 houses in the outside, and you have like 2 stone and 2 wood or something like that to start with. Which means those rules about the building and where you can place, you already start with enough resources to be able to build wherever you want. Not completely everywhere. Whereas in a multiplayer game, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't have any wood. I don't have it. Oh, right, I'm going to have to start, on the outside. So yeah, really enjoyed the solo game. If you want to see the video of me playing through that, that is online now. I've drifted off components and rulebook. I normally do components, which I've done, rulebook, graphic design. I have a problem with the graphic design, and it's only a small problem, but it's a problem which has actually affected every single one of the games that I played. Not just me, but other players as well, is the iconography for wine and oil is too similar, and it's a bit too dark. It's a dark brown circle, and they needed to be a little bit different. And it might sound like I'm really picking nits here, but it's been a problem in every game I've played. People have gone, wine, which one's that? That's that one. Which one's that on here? That's that one. They should have just made them, a bit more different than what they are. I mentioned different strategies in the game. And I mentioned right at the start, there's a low random element. So where is the random element in the game? Well, there isn't much, but there are these bonus cards. And you start with 1 bonus card. I think you get 3 dealt at the start of the game and you choose which one you're going to go with. Now, I personally like games where you actually keep all 3 cards and maybe discard them as the game goes on. I don't like having to make a decision at the start of the game, which is the strategy I'm going to do. But anyway, that's not the big problem. And this isn't a big problem either, but there is 1 space you can go to, which is the Rector's Palace, which gets you a bonus card. And you draw 2, and you put 1 to the bottom of the deck. And you might get a card which is like, 3 points for every stone. I've got 3 stone, that's 9 points. Great. And you reveal these at the end of the game. Or you might draw 2 cards and go, these are not worth anything really at all. Now, the idea is that you go to the Rector's Palace early in the game to get these cards, and it gives you something to aim for. But quite often people will go to that location at the end of the game, draw a couple of cards, and they might get one that suits their strategy or not. Now, it is only like maximum of 12 points, and you're going to be scoring, I don't know, something like 60, 70, 80 during the game. So it's not a massive swing, but I did mention at the start, a slight random element, and that's it. I'm not saying it's a problem at all. I'm just letting you know that there is that random card draw. You get 2 and you choose 1. There we go. Have I said everything that I wanted to say about it? I've not even looked at my notes once, so I'm going to look at my notes now just to see if there was anything I missed. Right, there was one other thing on my list of notes which I'd forgotten to say, and that is game balance. I mentioned that there's lots of different strategies. Somebody could go to the cathedral, like maybe I went to the cathedral twice in the last game, which meant at the end of the game I got I think it was like 12 or 14 points from things in the cathedral. Some people have said the cathedral's broken, and if you don't go into the cathedral, you won't win. Well, I've not seen that. Some people say the fish is too strong because this space here gets you points just for having fish. You don't have to spend them. I really hammered the fish in the last game, and I mean, yeah, not literally hammering the fish, but you know what I mean. And I was getting a lot of points from it during the game, and I think I came 3rd. So I didn't obviously do that well. So game balance wise, I personally think it's okay. I have read a number of articles online from people saying, oh, the walls are a bit broken, or the cathedral's a bit broken, cathedral. But yeah, I personally didn't find that a problem at all. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this video useful. And as I mentioned at the start, Thank you very much to all of my Patreon supporters. Without the support of my Patreon campaign, videos like this are not possible. So if you enjoy my content, if you find it useful, please consider supporting me over at patreon.com. Thank you very much to Capstone Games for providing me with a review copy of this game. And as I mentioned, this is a game that I won't say no to because Crunchy Decisions plays in an hour. I quite like it. There we go. Thanks very much for watching. Take care. I'll see you next time. Gaming Rules is proudly sponsored by Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Visit GameToppersLLC.com.